Okay, everybody, so here we go. We are going to begin this process of writing this song using these techniques. So, the first stage is just going to be the planning stage. So, let's take a peek at what we've got here. The challenge is to use these techniques. So, I have listed them here. I'm using a document in Google Docs. Normally, I would use a notebook for a lot of things. I might put these techniques on a Google Doc and keep it on my computer, but a lot of the planning I would start off with a piece of paper. I'm going to do it on a Google Doc this time just to keep it simple for showing you what I'm doing rather than trying to hold a camera over what I'm doing on a piece of paper. So I may move to paper and pencil at some point, especially when I start the lyrics. But for this planning stage, I think I can stick with a Google Doc. So first thing, let's review our techniques that we're going to use here. Now, again, if you're doing this process and you feel overwhelmed by doing all these things, then feel free to pick like 3 and just do those. I'm going to try and do all of these. So, here we go. So let's look at them. First of all, we're going to begin the song in the middle of a conversation or narrative, and we're going to do this both musically and lyrically. Now, when we say in the middle of a conversation or narrative, it doesn't mean you're, coming in with a sentence and saying, "What'd you say?" or something. It doesn't have to be that upfront. It can be subtle, and that's fine. You can have something like there's a backstory that the first couple of lines indicate that there's some backstory that the listener doesn't know. It can be subtle, but you do want to link it to the music somehow. In Regina's song Samson, she starts off on this ascending chord progression, and that sort of connects to it in a way. I'm going to try and do something like that. And then retell a commonly known story, but include fictional elements that not only contradict what happened, but also may not even fit in the story's setting. Again, in Regina's song, she chose the Samson and Delilah story, but she put things in there that were crazy, like Samson eating Wonder Bread, and things that contradicted the original story, like Delilah actually loving Samson, and things that weren't even in the original story and in fact contradict it. Next one, make the very first line of the song memorable and unique enough that it could serve as the title. Now, you should make your first line memorable and unique anyway. That's just good practice. But this one, we want it to be so memorable and unique that it could even serve as the song's title, even though we're not going to use it as the title, or you can, but you don't have to. Next, include at least one line that will make the listener wonder what you mean, a line that is open to interpretation and requires the listener to think. Now, what this means is you're not just going to tell a story. In fact, Regina's song, she doesn't tell the story. She just has Delilah talking about the story. And there are things in there where you're just like, what in the world does she mean here? Or how does that connect to the story? Something like that, where the listener has to think about it. You're not completely clear. All right, next one. In either the verse or the chorus, start it off with an ascending chord progression. Now, I said ascending here, but I think we could do thing is, descending chord progressions are really common. So let's keep it ascending, where you're moving up, because that's kind of unique. Next, we're going to include at least one interval that's a fourth or wider, or a fourth or bigger. And what that means is in the melody, you're going to go from one note to a fourth higher or a fourth below in your melody at least once. And then you're going to do the same thing some other place with a seventh or bigger. And this, again, that can be an upward step or a downward step in the melody. Okay. Next one, include at least one line that is repeated more than once, becoming more forceful and insistent on the repeat. So this is like in Regina's song where she goes, "I loved you first, I loved you first." And so she has that loved you, and she does that in a chord too. Bum, bum, bum. Now, again, you don't have to do that exact technique, and I don't have to do that exact technique, but that same thing where the second line is more forceful, but even though it's a repeat of the first line. Okay. Include at least one sung note that isn't in the chord that's being played. And this is the place in Regina's song where she's playing that weird chord. It's like in the key of B, but she's playing this E sus2 chord, singing an A sharp note. Gives it a strange feeling. So something along those lines. Next one, make the melodic rhythm of the verse different from the chorus, such as long notes in one and short notes in the other, or something else that contrasts in the rhythm. I think that's pretty straightforward. Insert one section of the song where the music aligns sound-wise with the emotion or mental state of what's being said in the lyric, where the melody kind of sounds like what they're talking about. And that can take lots of forms. And then this tent pole thing where Regina says, ate a slice of Wonder Bread. She jumps up to that note. It's a real high place in the song. And so I think of it as a tent pole that pushes the tent way up to this point. So put that somewhere in there. And this last one is the one that I may or may not do because my timing is already not great as a performer. But in Regina's song, she actually switches time signatures. There's a couple of places where she goes from 4/4 to 2/4 and back to 4/4 again. And so that's part of the challenge, but I might skip this one. Like I said, I'm bad at my timing and rhythm and keeping track of things like that as it is. So I may leave that one out. Okay, so this is our stuff. So the beginning of my planning would include going over what I want the song to be. And so that's what, looking at these techniques, this is the first part of my planning. I want to think, okay, I'm going to include all these things. My second step in the planning would be sort of putting these things in order in some way or another. It could be the order in which I'm going to tackle them. It could be the order in which I want them to take place in the song. Or it could be a combination of the two. Hey, these are the ones I want to hit first, and I think they're going to come in this order. So there's different ways to approach this. I could also just look at them one at a time and think about them and just sort of write down notes about it. Okay, for example, the second one, retell a commonly known story, but include fictional elements. So what I'm probably going to do early on, if not the first thing, is I'm going to make a list of some commonly known stories that I might choose from. Of course, I'm not going to do Samson and Delilah because that's already been done. I'm probably going to rule out other known stories that other people have sung about. I might rule out stories that are not necessarily commonly known, but I will probably brainstorm a list of those stories. I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. I'm going to do a page break just to keep these things separate. All right, so let's think about this. Maybe I'll make some categories. Some stories from history. Then there could be some stories from folklore, fairy tales. Let's see, I could choose from literature, news, okay. Oh, would there be anything else? I can add later. If I think of other categories, I can add them later. But let's take a look at some of these things. Let's just brainstorm some stuff. So coming up empty. Again, lack of coffee. So I am going to come back to this, but I've got my planning sheet started, and you could see the process that I will take. I will come back to this form and start, continue working on this. I'm going to drop down, do another page break, and let's go back up to our list again. Let's start plotting this out. Now, one of the things I said in the other video about this stuff is, in some ways, a lot of your work has been done for you by following these rules. And so we know that our chorus or our verse is going to contrast. And so we can take that and map out a skeleton of a song ahead of time. And, some of these things in the melody, we know there's going to be a fourth interval and a seventh interval. So some of these things, when we're writing our melody, you can think of this as some of the work has already been done because you know what you're going to do. So that's great. I'm going to see if there's anything in here that would make sense to put it in some kind of an order. I'm not worrying about the time signature. The tent pole thing, let's see. Music aligns sound-wise with the emotion of mental state of what's being said in the lyric. Well, that's going to depend on what I come up with in the story. So I'm going to hold off on that one. Melodic rhythm of the verse different from the chorus. Let's do something. I don't usually do this, but let's make a structure of a song like verse, chorus, bridge kind of a thing ahead of time. I think this might help speed the process. So I'm going to say verse 1. You know what? I'm going to start off with the chorus. Regina does this in her song, and I think that helps with the starting in the middle of a story. And I don't usually do this in my songs, but the whole point of this exercise is to try new things. So I'm going to start off with a chorus, and then I'm going to go into verse 1. Then I'm going to go back to this chorus again. Go verse 2. And because we're stuffing so many things into the song, I'm going to include a bridge, which may be as simple as a variation of a verse, but I'm going to plan for it. We're going to end up with the chorus again. And I'm going to write outro on here, but just like the intro, that may simply be the chords, the piano playing or whatever. So here is a structure of a song. And I'm going to plot some things. I'm going to take some things up here and I'm just going to stick them in there. So begin in the middle of a conversation. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it into my chorus. So I know I'm going to do that in the chorus. Let's see what else we can use. Commonly known story, fictional elements. That's part of, we've already done this. Make the very first line of the song memorable. That's going to be in our chorus as well. So let's take this. B. All right, so these are two things we know are going to be in our chorus that we're starting our song with. Let's see, commonly make the first line. Okay, include at least one line that will make the listener wonder what you mean. A line that is open to interpretation and requires the listener to think. Okay, because this is something, I want my choruses to be strong, and I think there's more room in the verses for there to be things that's open to interpretation. I probably don't want to confuse the listeners in my chorus. I mean, it's not that you can't do that, but I think I'm more likely to do this in my verses than in the chorus. So I'm going to put this in my verses for now. Just say verse 1. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Include at least one interval that's a fourth or wider and another interval that's a seventh or wider. This can be downward or upward. Okay, in Regina's song, she has the big jump in the chorus. Fourth or wider. This is something that could really be anywhere. So I am not going to put this in my structure yet because this is going to be something that's really going to depend on how my melody is going. So I'm going to hold off on putting this in my predetermined structure. Include at least one line that is repeated more than once, becoming more forceful, insistent on the repeat. All right, Regina does this in the chorus where she says, I loved you first, I loved you first. So just to be different, I'm going to put this in my verse as well. I'm just going to make these decisions ahead of time. I can change my mind on this later, but this will give me something to focus on. There we go. Melodic rhythm of the verse different from the chorus, like long notes in one, short notes in the other. That could go either way. I'm going to hold off on planning that one. Music aligned sound-wise with the emotional or mental state of what's being said in the lyric. That could be anywhere, and that's going to kind of depend on my story. Tent pole thing could be anywhere. I'm going to hold off on that. So here we go. Let's look at what we've got. We've planned, we're not planning out our bridge yet because I think that will depend on the story. We don't really have to plan out verse 2 or the other choruses because they're going to include what we've already got in here. So we know the song's going to start and there may or there may not be an intro. we may just go directly into the chorus. Regina does in her song. She just starts off immediately with, "You are my sweetest downfall." So that can be determined later. But we do know that in the chorus, it's somehow going to indicate that we're in the middle of a conversation or in the middle of the story where the listener kind of doesn't know what the backstory is yet. And it's going to align musically and lyrically somehow. Also, the very first line of the chorus needs to be something so memorable and unique. It's going to be something that is not in other songs. So we know these two things about our chorus. In our verse, I'm going to look at the middle thing here because it says started off. We know that our verse is going to start off with an ascending chord progression. So we know we're going to build that in there, and playing that chord progression, however it ascends, will help us determine what our melody is going to be. All right. We are going to have at least one line that will make the listener wonder what we mean. So there's going to be one line in there in the verse that's going to be kind of, what is that? And then also somewhere in there, we're going to repeat a line twice, and it's going to build up and be more forceful or insistent on the repeat. It doesn't have to be crazy or out of control. Da, 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 da. It could just be very subtle. Regina's song, it's very subtle. Okay, so what we have here is kind of the outline of structure of a song with things that we know are going to go in there. And in some cases, this may feel like we're constrained in what we do. It could also be like it's going to help us figure out what to do. I'm going with the latter because I'm a positive thinker. And in my next session, I'm either going to do a little bit more planning, probably going to, in the meantime, be thinking about some stories I could retell. And I may well have built up this list by the time we do my next session. But another thing I'm going to start doing is probably going to be looking at lyrics. Not sure about that. I have a hard time putting lyrics to a pre-existing melody. And so I don't think I'm going to write my melody first. I think I'm going to write my lyrics first, but I don't know yet. So that'll be coming up later. Okay, so that's my planning session.